Lotus fell forward, but her magic spilt out in the form of light pink flower petal shield. It cushioned her fall. Stephanie entered, bathed in madness which emitted from her in the form of pitch-black shadows. "You, cursed woman! You and that abomination killed Kamen. I am going to end your pathetic life." Stephanie's eyes flashed with blinding rage and anger. Her hair were in disarray as her magic leached out of her in torrents. Her shadows lunged for Cassandra, but Lotus wedged herself between them and spoke. "Arena battles are always like that. When you signed up for it, you should have been prepared for the consequences too." Her fingertips glowed with a blinding light. Her magic erupted, forming a sword of wood and thorns to fight against Stephanie. Cassandra stood behind Lotus, watching Stephanie with a guarded expression. "I don't care. I am going to end her meaningless life, and then do the same to that shifter Rut." Stephanie shouted and attacked. The black shadows crawled, taking spiked shapes to their edges. Lotus defended with her sword and formed a defensive wreath around Cassandra, but it wasn't enough. Cassandra's sword had dropped in the arena, so she had nothing to defend herself with. The magic Lotus had bathed her in earlier had worn off. She shrieked as several of them pierced the shield and then her soft skin, drawing out blood from her face, arms, and abdomen. "Feel the pain, like I did when I saw him burn," Stephanie yelled in madness, stepping closer to her sisters who struggled to keep up with her powers. Cassandra felt her skin burning as if it had been set on fire. Her shrieks got louder. "Stop this nonsense, Stephanie. She is our little sister." Lotus's own magic gushed out, forming sharp spikes out of thorns. She hurled them towards Stephanie, pushing her back with a force. She yelled out in maddening ferocity and hit the back wall. Her shadows retracted, but not fully. Some still clung to Cassandra, sucking out her life force. The door banged open, and Cyrus barged inside, followed by Valerian. Cyrus's whole concentration was on his mate, who was convulsing and shrieking in pain. The anger gripped him like a vice, and he wished to squash the life out of Stephanie, but first, he needed to get to Cassandra. Valerian reached for Stephanie. His magic flowed out in waves, hitting her like a whirlwind, dissipating her. The shadows disappeared, as Valerian's magical white streaks that cackled the air held Stephanie's hands captive. "Stop it, Steph," he said rather gently, considering she was trying to kill her sister. Stephanie struggled like a madwoman against her father's restraints. Lotus let out a sigh as she let her magic drop while Cyrus caught Cassandra in his arms before she could hit the floor. The sight of her wounded and bloody body drove his mind to the edges of insanity. The costume Lotus had given her saved her from getting fatally injured, though. "Cassandra!" he called out, but her eyes closed as her body went flaccid. His hands gently rubbed her injured cheek, desperately trying to stop the bleeding. His head whipped to the father-daughter duo and he raged, his eyes swirling with an amalgamation of colors. "If anything happens to my mate, I will wage war against your kingdom and burn everything down. But first I will kill this she-devil you call a daughter. I should have ended her in the arena. I will send healers. She will be fine. Lotus, assist him." Valerian grumbled. His shoulder-length hair bounced on his fancy garb as he grabbed Stephanie and exited the door, closing it behind him with a flick of his finger. Cyrus wished to go after them, but his mate needed him. Gently picking her up, he placed her on the bed. Curses flowed from his mouth, making his whole body go taut. "I will heal her. Step back," Lotus ordered, standing up and gesturing with her hand. "Not in the name of any god I am leaving her, or trusting any of you." Cyrus protectively stood over his mate, not budging but glaring at Lotus. She shook her head at him in disappointment and banged her hand on her forehead. "I thought you were only slightly oafish with muscles, but it seems like you are quite dull too." Cyrus grunted loudly at the insult. His nose flared in anger at the audacity of this petite woman who seemed to be as delicate as a flower and yet was prickly as a thorn with a spirit of fire. "I am on her side. I was trying to protect her, you fool. Now stand back and let me heal my sister, or my poisonous vines will be your friend," she threatened, raising her hands. Her magic danced at her fingertips as few brown vines sprouted from them and writhed like snakes. The raging storms in her eyes told him she was quite serious. Cyrus didn't wish to let go of his mate, but This woman had a positive vibe, and Cassandra had been comfortable with her. "I am staying right beside her, though." He took a step back, letting go of Cassandra's hand. It pained his heart as the connection was severed between them. Every muscle in his body strained to just pick her up and leave this forsaken place in that instant, but she was in no condition to travel like that. He would be taking her as soon as she had healed a bit and was fit to travel. Lotus swished her hands in delicate movements. Her healing magic erupted slowly, like green wisps of healing smoke. It settled against Cassandra's wounds, instantly stopping the flow of blood. She then used conjured-up herbs and flowers to close the wounds. It was a delight to watch. If he hadn't been so on the edge, Cyrus would have thoroughly enjoyed it. 2 royal healers arrived soon enough, and Lotus gave them a string of instructions for the concoctions they were to brew. Potions couldn't be conjured. They needed to be prepared, and that's what they were going to do. Lotus had drained herself, using all of her magic to heal her sister and close her wounds. She then turned to Cyrus, who was pacing the room like a man possessed, his huge hand holding his chin captive, lost in thoughts. He was so much taller than Lotus. "I have sealed all the wounds, but she needs rest, and I will bring about some healing potions soon. Don't touch her. She doesn't want to be your mate. So stay within your boundaries," Lotus told him flatly, not caring in least about his feelings. She only cared about her sister, who had been put through hell. "I might be an oaf and barbarian, but I am also an alpha with principles. Have some faith in me," he answered with a scoff, watching the determined woman. "Sadly for you, I don't trust men or their intentions. Hurt her and I will hunt you down, not caring if you are an alpha or whatever." With this warning, Lotus walked out of the room, leaving Cyrus with complicated thoughts. Cassandra woke up to someone's light snores. Her head felt heavy and her body ached. She slowly sat up in bed and found someone holding her hand. Glancing in the direction, she found Cyrus's face right closer to her hand. He was sleeping on a chair, his enormous hand resting on hers in a delicate grip. The worries etched on his sandy, shaded forehead in the form of ridges of a desert. The fire still cackled in the fireplace, giving an orangish glow to Cyrus's hair. She couldn't help but observe his sharp features. Everything about him seemed to have been dipped in steel and forged in iron. And she wondered if his heart possessed mercy, or if he would be as abusive as most alphas were known to be. He had a temper, and he showed no traces of remorse or mercy towards the people he had killed. The man terrified Cassandra, and his obsessiveness to own her further cemented this belief that he would rather kill her than let her go free. Yet there was this yearning inside her, to let him consume and burn her like embers in a hearth. He had protected her when her own fiancé had refused, the man she had known since childhood, the man she had tried to love but only received coldness from. She was at such a crossroads with no direction on which path to follow. With a sigh, Cassandra slowly extracted her hand so as not to wake him. She tried to check up on her wounds and found them healed. Her special costume had reduced the damage caused to her body, for she knew how dangerous Stephanie's power was. If it hadn't been for Lotus and the timely intrusion of her father and Cyrus, she would have been dead. She tried to sit up straight, and the silken bedsheets under her rustled, waking Cyrus up. His gorgeous eyes opened in confusion and found her. Panic was what he found in her eyes as she tried to curl into herself, trying to put distance between them. Her reactions he didn't understand. He wouldn't hurt her. Why was she always frightened of him? "How are you feeling?" he softly asked, sitting up straight and spreading his legs, his eyes never leaving hers. "Better. We are leaving first thing in the morning. All arrangements are in place. Unlike your family, I won't try to kill you. I will always protect you," he tried to reassure her. But his over-the-edge demeanor and his desire to enforce his decisions instead of asking for her choices made Cassandra wary of him. "Leaving? We didn't even have a conversation about what happened in the arena. You didn't even explain or tell me what this mate term you keep referring me to island, nor have we addressed the fact that you hid your identity from me. I don't even know what you are. A shifter? Or a mage? A combination of both? Or something entirely different? And now you demand I leave with a stranger," she ranted. trying to inject some semblance of confidence in her voice. It trembled. His meticulous gaze easily unnerved her. He didn't blink, his hands stapled in front of him. "Later, we leave here first." He offered a few words while observing the dip in her slender neck. The soft light from the fire painted it orangish yellow. "What if I say I don't want to leave with you?" she asked, rubbing her shoulders, trying to comfort herself and not be unsettled by his magnetic gaze. Cyrus slowly placed his hand on his face, his index finger resting on his temple, while his thumb remained elegantly perched under his chin. "That's not an option for you. Do you want to die so desperately?" He couldn't fathom why she wished to stay after the chaos that had unfolded. Or maybe it was because of that jester fiancé of hers. If he wished, he would squash him like a bug. But he didn't want her to hate him even before they had a chance to start a relationship. She tried to speak, but he cut her off with his sharp words. The idea of her rejecting him for another man turned his insides. "We are leaving, and that's final." He mind-linked his beta, and the door knocked in that very instant. She felt the flip in his mood and pulled the sheets up her body as if trying to protect herself. "Come in," he ordered, never tearing his eyes off her. Renan and two other men entered and stood behind him, waiting for instructions. Their eyes remained downcast. "Pack your Luna's stuff. We are leaving this forsaken place." "Yes, Alpha." They bowed and began to open her closet and drawers. Cassandra was horrified for a second. How could they rampage through her personal stuff? Didn't they understand the word privacy? "Wait, what are you doing? Stop touching my belongings," she yelled out, pulling the sheets aside to get up. They didn't listen as if deaf. "Keep lying down. They know what they need to do," Cyrus told her in calmness, seeing her get agitated. "Tell your men to stop." Cassandra turned to Cyrus and demanded. She felt so weak she could hardly stand up. Her head was heady and whirling, and she blacked out for standing up too hastily. Fast like lightning, he got up and caught her. Cassandra's hand went to her head. "What's wrong with my head?" she wondered aloud as his rough hands scalded her wherever they touched. "You lost too much blood, and now you stood up quickly when I told you to rest. Can you ever listen?" He so wished to roll his eyes at her. Laying her down back in bed, he kept holding her. Memories of something hit Cassandra like a tornado of fire amidst an avalanche. It sent her spiraling. Why was his touch so familiar, and yet so foreign? That voice seemed to have whispered sweet nothings and sultry murmurs to her countless times. She was lying in his lap amidst a meadow. His sonorous laughter filled her vicinity as she found herself smiling back at him. But when and how? Her body seemed different, felt different, and then she remembered a name. Her mouth seemed to be murmuring it. Kale. Kale. Who was Kale? Her eyes slowly closed, and the last thing she saw was his lush hair falling on his concerned eyes. Cassandra's eyes opened suddenly because of the bumps her body experienced. For a second, she was lost, for her surroundings were so unfamiliar. Her head still hurt, so this time she gradually sat up from among the silken sheets she had been lying in. It was a carriage with no seats. The floor had been cushioned with a feathery mattress and silks to make it more comfortable. The low light filtered through the carriage's tinted window. The galloping of the horses outside was loud, and Cassandra panicked. She was alone. There was no female escort with her. Staring down at herself, she saw that her clothes had been changed. She was clad in a thin cotton dress which wasn't too fancy but rather light and airy. There was no corset, the reason she could easily breathe. Her lungs seemed to be able to function at their full capacity, but that was the only relief. She needed to know where she was being taken. Frantically, she banged with her fist at the side of the carriage and shouted, "Stop! Where are you taking me?" Her hand ached from the force she applied, but she didn't pause in her action. The neighing of the steeds was followed by murmurs, and the carriage finally came to a halt. Cassandra clutched the silken sheets tighter. Her knuckles turned snow-white. The door of the carriage was pushed open, and the hulking frame of Cyrus peeked inside like a peeping Tom. Seeing her frightened out of her wits, he let out a low sigh. and his bare shoulders hunched low. He swiftly climbed inside, his movements so agile like a panther's. He closed the door behind him and locked it from inside. Tapping it, he ordered, "Let's go." The carriage resumed its movements. The hooves thundered on the ground as the convoy began to move again. Cyrus turned his head to face a cowering Cassandra. "How are you feeling?" he queried with worry, staying at a distance from her so his long legs wouldn't touch her and he wouldn't freak her out any further. But he couldn't help but inhale that alluring scent of hers that hung like warm notes in this carriage and drew him in like a magnet to the iron. Her pupils had enlarged in fear, and her heart was galloping in her chest, just like the horses outside. He could clearly hear it. "Where am I?" Her eyes darted from him to outside, trying to get a hold of her surroundings. "En route to your new home, Dusartine," Cyrus answered in a matter-of-fact tone, turning her into a concoction of anger, regrets, and vulnerability, all swirling inside her at the same time, rendering her to speak in angry bursts. "You took me away while I was unconscious. You didn't have the decency to let me say goodbye." Cyrus visibly relaxed, letting his ripped body slide down and settle comfortably against the velvet cushions. His corded arms went behind his head, and the biceps in his arms flexed as he leaned on his intertwined hands against the carriage's interior. "To whom exactly? Your characterless father or psychotic elder sister who wanted you dead, or maybe that spineless wimp you called fiancé? The only person who cared for you was Lotus, and she agreed with my decision to take you away. That shadow-controlling freak was planning to kill you in your sleep. Lotus and I had to act," he told her in his calm and composed voice. Cassandra bristled at his words. Why did he feel the need to mock her? They are still my family. I had a right to at least get some closure. Going with someone like you means I will never get to see them again, especially Lotus. The mere thought pained her already wounded heart. One after the other, people were deciding her fate without her having any say. Now she was at the mercy of a cruel man who claimed her as his, forcing her to be his mate. She could only wonder what he would do to her when she would be all alone with him, away from her family. At least in her father's kingdom, she was protected, or she believed. Someone like me? He raised a brow at her, but he clearly wasn't ready for the words she threw at him next. Just remember, if you force yourself on me, I will fight back with everything I have. She fumed, her eyes holding fears and regrets he knew would take a long time to assuage. The silence followed her words. It painfully stretched for a few seconds, filled with clamoring of the horses and dragging of the cart along the dirt road. Such a high opinion you hold of me. Hurt stung his voice. The pain prickled his heart as his gaze roamed her face. The bond squirmed and tightened his chest. She didn't feel the fraction of what he did towards her, he assumed. What else am I to think of a person who doesn't understand consent? You haven't given me a reason to believe otherwise. Seriousness in his gaze amplified at her words, and a scoff fell through his partially parted lips. He straightened up, and the relaxed posture disappeared. His back stiffened. You know nothing. We haven't even begun, and you have formed an opinion. Rest assured, princess. I might be a barbarian, but I am far from being a bastard. The hurt crawled its way out and stood like an ugly truth between them, wedging itself, creating a rift. His large hand reached out and tapped the carriage door in loud and quick succession. The carriage halted, instantly. We will be stopping for dinner shortly. You must be hungry. There is water skin under your pillow. Quench your thirst. My lands are hot. Keep hydrated. Without a further glance in her direction, he threw the door open and exited, leaving her pondering and her heart hammering in her chest. The dreams were so real, and the man she usually saw in them had been personified. But why did he seem so different from the versions her reveries projected? The carriage finally stopped, and Cassandra peeked out. She had been feeling stuffy and hot. The change in the atmosphere wasn't very subtle. The door knocked from the outside, and someone called out and asked, Lady Cassandra, would you like to step out? Cassandra glanced around and picked up the small shawl, which had been placed neatly near her pillow. Draping it around her shoulders, she went to open the door and curiously but nervously stared out. The young man whom she had earlier thought to be the Alpha of Dusartine stood there with a cheeky smile. His hair was sandy shaded, as if the essence of the desert had been captured by them. The eyes were a lighter shade of gold, almost yellowish with hints of orange, but held a twinkle of mischief which lacked in Sarus's orbs. Similar to his brother, he wore nothing on his torso, just a fine garment which was elegantly wrapped around his waist and fell to his knees. He was a few inches shorter than his older brother, and his body leaner in build. There was this boyish charm about him that spoke of his personality. "My lady," he respectfully stated, offering her his hand. Cassandra reluctantly accepted it, and he helped her step down from the carriage. The evening was melding into the night. The shades of blue and red merged into black. A slight whirl of hot air welcomed her as she glanced around to see the barren, rocky terrain that lay all around. A single rough road had been carved between for the travelers. A few trees and shrubs could be seen strewn all over, but mostly, the landscape lacked vegetation. Cassandra wrapped her free arm around herself and glanced around wearily. "Relax. I am Ferris Dusartine, your mate's younger brother." He chuckled to lower her anxiety. Cassandra cast him a curious glance and found he did resemble his brother in many ways. And yet, he was different. She only nodded and extracted her hand. He guided her forward towards a few rocks. A bonfire had been lit between them, and the delicious smell of burning meat wafted from the sticks with skewered fox and rabbit on them. The men who had come to fetch their alpha were sitting all around the crackling fire and enjoying the charred meat. One of them was feeding the 3 strong horses while Sarus was missing. Cassandra wondered why there were only 2 horses when there were more men. "Here!" Ferris offered the cleanest of the stones to Cassandra while laying a piece of cloth on it so her dress wouldn't be ruined. Cassandra quietly settled on it as Renon offered her a stick with a whole cooked rabbit on it. "Sorry, we don't have any utensils or cutlery. Can you make do?" he asked in an apologetic tone. "You have nothing to worry about. I will manage." Cassandra accepted the stick with a small smile, but had no clue how to eat the meat. She tried to poke it with her finger, and found the meat to be burning hot. Quickly withdrawing it, she waited for it to cool a bit. The men got busy tearing apart the charred meat with their hands and teeth and cracking jokes. They were loud and merry, without a care in the world, drinking ale from goatskin and tankards. So vastly different from the mages she had grown up with, who were mostly broody and preferred keeping to themselves. Their egos touched the roof and considered their manners to be too sophisticated from other species. It was becoming abundantly clear to her that their lifestyle and cultures were thoroughly unalike. Her eyes wandered to see where their brooding alpha was, but she couldn't find him anywhere. For a while, she stared at the wooden skewer in her hand. Her tummy grumbled from hunger. She couldn't even remember when was the last time she had eaten. Cassandra tried to break off a small piece, but it was still hot, and she scalded her index finger and thumb. Not trying to act whiny, she didn't cry out and placed them in her mouth to soothe. Someone came from behind, and the wooden stick was plucked from her hand. She instantly turned with her index finger still in her mouth, and found Sarus obscuring her vision with his huge frame, his jaw so tense that she could sense the tension brewing on his face. With his slender fingers, he began to pluck out the tender pieces of the meat as if they weren't scalding hot. He quietly collected them on his palm, letting them cool before offering them to her by extending his large hand. Not saying a word, but letting his actions speak. His right leg rested on the stone on which Cassandra sat, and his extended arm was perched on it. The unfathomable emotions he held on his face were something Cassandra was not ready to decipher at that moment. But she knew he was pissed at her, for he made no effort to speak. His nose twitched as he tried not to be overwhelmed by her scent. The chatter around them had died down, and everyone silently watched, especially Ferris, who was tearing the charred meat apart with a knowing grin. "Brother is so smitten," he muttered under his breath. Amusement dripped from his words, and ran and lowered his head so he wouldn't laugh out aloud. Cassandra was still awkwardly staring at him when he finally broke the silence in a mocking tone. "It's not poisoned." Cassandra's ears scalded, turning crimson, and she quickly picked up a piece and plopped it in her mouth. She didn't wish for them to think she was some spoiled princess who thought she was above them. She was merely terrified of her future and what it held for her. "Thank you." She tried to show her gratitude by engulfing the saltless and spiceless piece of meat. His gold-infused eyes, which hid emotions still foreign to her in their multitude of folds, continued to observe her reactions. His hand remained in front, so she could eat with ease. It stuck in her throat. The taste was bland, and having no salt made it difficult for her to eat. The hint of amusement was tipping his lips upwards, seeing her struggle to keep the chewed meat down. "Ranon." Water. He ordered his beta, and the black-haired man quickly got up and offered a clean water skin to Cassandra. They were designed in a way to keep water cool in this heat. With a thankful nod, accepted it and took a swig. The muscles of her neck swiftly moved as she gulped, giving a clear view to Cyrus's hungry eyes. They were latched onto her enticing slope, urging him to run a finger. Nipping the urge down, he spoke in an amused voice. "Our beasts are used to eating raw. We don't mind the spiceless food. Our females make better food than us men. Bear with us until we get there." Cassandra let out a sigh of relief, and also understood why men were happily devouring such meat. A few more days, and she would be able to get a proper meal. After the dinner, Cyrus told his men to rest while he decided to keep the first watch. "We will camp here for the night. At dawn, we will set out again." His men nodded, getting up and putting out the fire. The night wasn't cold enough for the fire to be needed. "Come, I will escort you to the carriage." Cyrus dusted his hands, removing the remaining crumbs. She had gotten up from the stone and he guided her back, remaining at a distance. Opening the carriage door, he let her step inside. She gathered her dress at the sides and climbed into the khaki-painted vehicle, which had 4 robust black steeds pushing it. The animals were gigantic beasts with glistening manes and well-defined bodies. Cassandra turned to face Cyrus, but before she could say anything, he quipped, holding the door. "No one will step inside your place. No one will even look at you wrong, irrespective of what you believe about us. So sleep in peace, princess." He closed the door on her bewildered face, not letting her have a last word or throw back a jibe. Walking back to the stones they had formerly been sitting, he took his position and perched himself with his legs spread wide. His men were preparing to sleep on the hard ground. They were tough and used to it. They didn't need any mattresses. "Here, unwind." Ferris joined him while offering his wineskin, made out of goat's hide. Cyrus grabbed it and began to chug it down as if it were water. His prominent Adam's apple bobbed with every gulp. The bitter taste of the wine burnt its way down his throat. "Did you tell her?" Ferris asked, as Cyrus removed it from his mouth and swiped his wet lips with the back of his hand. Handing it back, he snorted. "She has already decided to hate me without even giving me a chance. How was I supposed to tell her about the type of life she would have?" Ferris patted his brother's tensed but extremely broad shoulder, bestowed his wisdom. "You realize she can't sense the mate bond like you do? She is not a shifter, and even being born as a mage princess, she has no magic, which makes her a fragile human. You will need to be patient and slow with her. She is not that fragile. Didn't you see her fight alongside me in the arena? She is just very strong-headed." Cyrus's head was still swimming from her intoxicating scent. Being in her proximity stirred every beast that lay within him, and yet he knew he couldn't touch her after what she had said. Well, she will need all the strength and strong-headedness if she is to survive what waits back at the pack. The truth will hurt her. Faris took a chug from the wineskin. A drop dribbled out from the side of his lips. "If it hadn't been for my people, I wouldn't have brought someone without their permission. I didn't have a choice, and telling her the truth would make her retaliate even further. Bro, she still will. Who would want the kind of life she is going to have in addition to knowing your lifestyle?" Faris quipped, his eyes shining with mischief as he hinted at his tastes in women. "Perks of being an alpha. I never wanted a mate. Knowing the kind of life she would have." He dragged in a sigh as Ferris extended the wineskin to his brother again. Gods have it out for you, giving you an animal spiritless, wolfless, magicless mate, and then leading you to her. All I can do is wish you luck. Try not to break her. Siros took a chug and laid the wineskin on the rough surface of the stone. Placing his hands on the back of his head, he leaned back and laid down on the gray boulder, staring wistfully at the half-moon above. He wondered what he and his people had done wrong to incur the wrath of the gods and end up the way they had. She is going to get broken, one way or the other. I am sure her family has already damaged her enough, and now she thinks she has been handed over to a group of barbarians. Cyrus laid out the words as if they physically hurt him. He could feel the pressure of having the responsibility of someone on his shoulders. Before Ferris could answer his brother, the moon was obscured by the large leathery wings, and Cyrus shot up from the stone he had been casually lying on. Ferris's gaze shifted towards the sky as well, as they heard the flapping of wings and screeching sounds. What was that? I thought most of the creatures had fled from these lands. Ferris's troubled eyes wandered to his brother, who was standing on the stone with his head raised high towards the heavens and his brows pinching together in a scrutinizing gaze. The creatures circled above their heads and swiftly landed right in front of the two brothers. Cyrus's shoulders hunched. The bands of his back muscles rippled as he let out a warning growl, seeing what they were. His men woke up bewildered, hearing their alpha's call, but stood in their steps. The moon darkened with stormy clouds as a mist of fear descended all around them, obscuring everyone's view. They were Erinyes, the creatures of night and vengeance who took revenge on men taking false oaths and not fulfilling them. With heads and bodies of beautiful, seductive women and wings and teeth like that of a devil, black and dark like their hearts. Their hands were nothing but sharp claws and their feet like pigs' hooves. The men stood frozen, their hearts filled with fear seeing the Furies. Only Cyrus was not affected by their arrival, as he readied himself to shift in case they attacked. The front one flashed him a smile, revealing her teeth, blacker than a bottomless pit. Alpha of Dusartine, she spoke, her voice wispy but injecting a feeling of utter dread in their hearts. Ferris shivered behind his brother. Her companions tittered, flashing their blackened teeth as well. They glistened in an unholy fashion. The allure in their voices was evil and yet fascinating. The temperature dropped a few degrees. Declare your purpose for interrupting me and my men at this late hour, Cyrus spoke in his alpha tone, not at all feeling deterred by their presence. Their leader giggled, folding her battered wings. The voice echoed ominously all around them. You swore an oath, Alpha. We are here to warn you to keep it. Break it, and we will come to collect the debt. The lightning cracked in the background, hitting a distant tree. The loud rumble followed, waking Cassandra up with a shudder. Something was off. Something was wrong. She crawled towards the window and tried to stare outside, but found only darkness. The horses were neighing as if in panic, and thunder was rolling in the sky. Her heart picked up its pace as the door of her carriage creaked open inch by inch. Cassandra's frightened eyes wandered towards the creaking door as a claw with bony fingers and pointed nails appeared. Before she could shriek, she heard Cyrus's voice. Don't dare enter. She is mine. The most sinister laugh Cassandra had ever heard rang out as she saw a glowing red eye before the door was slammed shut by Cyrus, wedging himself between the Furies and his mate. He had shifted from the stones at lightning pace and arrived near his mate's carriage. What a pretty little thing. We wonder how you will keep that oath, Alpha. That's my problem. Leave. I don't like being threatened, and I don't tolerate threateners. Cyrus knew this would get bloody, and the way his men had been hypnotized, he wouldn't be able to save everyone. There were 3 of them, and from what he had seen and heard of them beforehand, they were lightning fast. Their leader batted her eyes at Cyrus. Disgust coiled in his guts as she stepped closer. Her foul breath made his nose wrinkle up. Her sharp nails traced the bare skin of his torso and stopped right above his heart. Poking the skin there with her index finger, she tantalizingly spoke. Her voice rang like hundreds of tiny bells. The weak of hearts would fall into her feet. What a fine specimen you are. It will be a shame to chew out that heart of yours. Its beats are so enticing. His hardened skin pierced from the pressure she applied. Retracting her hand, she licked the blood of her claw with her long forked tongue. "Keep your claws off me, or you might lose them," he threatened, his voice dripping with poison of revulsion. Delicious. Just like you and your attitude. She found it thrilling how unaffected he was by their presence. While the mortals trembled and froze in their presence, this unique alpha seemed unfazed. "Be gone!" Cyrus thundered again, and just as the Furies had appeared, they disappeared, opening their dark wings, melting away into the darkened night. Their ringing laughter was left behind as their last words rang through the air. "We will meet again." The clouds shifted away from the moon, revealing its obscured beauty. The men whose hearts had been frozen from fear regained their senses. Some breathed out heavily. Renon hurried to Cyrus's side, and so did Ferris. He was standing tall in all his majestic glory with his hands at his hips, protecting the carriage. "Did they harm you? Or—" Ferris's voice trailed off as his worried eyes flickered towards the closed door. "No!" Cyrus heaved out. His chest tightened from the rage that was surfacing within him. His nostrils enlarged, and fists clenched, whitening his knuckles. "We apologize, Alpha. But as soon as I woke up, I was immobilized. I tried to move but failed. The fear had settled in my heart and bones." Renon apologetically explained. Others nodded behind him. "I know. No explanation needed. They cut through my barrier." Cyrus could see how they had invaded through his protective shield, the one he had set up earlier so no creature would attack them. Erignes can't be held back. They are God's executioners. Ferris provided his input on them. "I don't understand why they intercepted us. They only appear when oaths are not fulfilled," Renon asked, panic apparent in his voice. "It's a warning. I have to uphold my oath, or everyone will be punished." Cyrus had this forlorn look in his eyes, and the swirling thoughts of the woman inside. He, one who had been chosen to be his mate. "Keep guard. I need to see her and tell her the truth. She must prepare for this and accept her fate," he declared with finality while turning around to open the door. "Wait. Brother, this is not the right time. Let's get back to the pack and then talk to her." "Calm down first," Ferris advised, seeing how on the edge his brother seemed. He didn't want him to take a wrong step and regret it. "Calm down? How should I do that when my whole life is screwed? You know what's at stake here. Keep guard, and let me make this decision," he seethed out. His golden eyes blazed like fiery pits of melted gold as his overwhelming aura shot out and hit them. Instantly, everyone bent their knees and lowered their heads in submission. Cyrus yanked open the carriage door and entered. He needed to speak with her. Cassandra was sitting up straight, slightly shaken from seeing that clawed hand and someone trying to sneak in. She knew Cyrus had prevented the creature from entering the carriage. "What was that? What's happening?" Cassandra asked in agitation. The frantic beats of her heart were heard loud and clear by Cyrus. He wished to comfort her, but her earlier comments resurfaced in his mind, and he kept his distance as much as possible in this small space. The rage consuming him slightly lessened being in her proximity, although she ignited a different kind of rage in him, the kind which threatened to burn his existence. Seeing her innocent face and the courage he had gathered to tell her the truth vanished like a wisp of smoke in thin air. She was already scared. The past 2 days had been nothing but traumatizing for her. He couldn't go on and burden her with the truth that her future had already been dictated, and he had brought her along for selfish reasons. Even though she had expressed no desire to be his mate, she didn't deserve the life he was going to thrust her into. "Nothing you should worry about. Sleep now," he ordered in his alpha tone, forgetting it didn't work on her. She narrowed her eyes at him, a scowl overtaking her beautiful features, but she held her tongue. He was concerned enough to check up on her and protect her, but he surely didn't know how to talk to a lady. "I saw something trying to climb in it." She was rudely cut off by his curt tone. "It didn't. Sleep. We leave before dawn." They stared at each other, and her scowl deepened at his rudeness. She opened the carriage window a notch, letting the fresh air in as she turned away from him. Giving him her back, Cassandra closed her eyes and tried to sleep. Her breathing soon evened out, and he knew she had gone to sleep. The moonlight bathed her back in its glow. The light garment clung to her body. Cyrus couldn't help but greedily stare at what he couldn't have until the dawn would break, and it would be time to head towards their packed territory. He hoped to spend the rest of the night in peace, without any more surprises. "Good night, princess," he slowly whispered, sliding down a bit and struggling with the craving to not touch her. Her saffron-like scent swirled around him, making him dizzy. Saffron was the spice of his lands, and just like it, his mate was rich and rare, with her slightly sweet and earthy tones. He believed it was no coincidence that she smelled like the spice which gave them their livelihood. Cyrus finally drifted into slumber, lying down. The carriage was not a very wide space, and as his arms stretched in the sleep, it landed on Cassandra. It was heavy and sweaty, but it contained his essence. The mate bond weaved around them like tendrils and brought their sleepy bodies close. Cassandra was still recovering from all that blood loss and injuries, while Cyrus had been sleep-deprived. He hadn't slept peacefully since she had been injured, constantly keeping guard on her so no one would dare hurt her again. It would be his biggest regret if she was to be injured under his care. Last night, those creatures had almost climbed inside her safe place, and it gnawed on his soul. Now, his sleepy mind tugged him closer to her, and like a sleep-inducing elixir, she seeped into his very pores. His arms securely wrapped around her waist, he unintentionally pulled her into himself, letting her back collide with his bare torso. "So soft. Lick her, scent her, roll her over." Different animal spirits inside of him put forward their suggestions, but Cyrus was too tired to entertain them. He just wished to sleep with her, tucked safely in his burly arms. A curtain of calmness fell over Cassandra, like a missing piece of her heart and soul had been clicked into place when he tugged her into his corded arm. She snuggled with him. The nights in this region turned cold, irrespective of the days being hot because of sand. Their frames were perfectly molded together. Cyrus buried his nose into her soft curls, his lips resting on the silkiness and then on her scalp. He hadn't felt this sleepy and calm in his entire life. It was a different feeling. The feeling of being bonded to this woman in his arms. They slept until the first rays of the sun filtered through the tinted window. They were supposed to leave at dawn, but everyone knew their alpha was sleep-deprived and didn't disturb him. He hardly ever slept. The turmoil and duties mostly kept him awake. Cassandra was first to stir when light hit her face, and for a few seconds, she couldn't understand where she was and why her heart was so beyond calm. And then she felt him, all of him, all his ruggedness, the strength of his arm, the softness of his lips, the grip of his hand, the warmth of his breath. Every muscle in her body went taut at the implications of sleeping in a man's arms. She had never slept in a male's embrace before, and hence the feeling wasn't foreign. Her whole skin tingled like tiny sparks dancing on the very parts that connected with him. The crevices of her brain had these memories which weren't hers, and yet they were there. This touch somehow didn't seem foreign to her. She felt safe in his soothing embrace, and didn't wish to push him away, and yet she knew this was far from appropriate. Finally, her brain fully awakened, and Cassandra tried to wriggle out of his hold. His arms seemed to be built from iron, for they wouldn't budge. "So much for the promise I won't touch you. What a liar," she mumbled as her heart thudded inside her chest while she pushed his arm with both of her hands. The light garment she had worn had lifted from her milky thigh. Bearing it as his bronzed, muscular one was draped on it. And now she could sense something poking her back. Her eyes suddenly expanded from the realization, and Cassandra fully panicked. "Let go," she voiced out, heavily, ignoring the titillating sensations her body was experiencing. She didn't understand these conflicting emotions, this pull towards this rude man. Cyrus slowly lifted his leg and slackened his hold on her waist so she could shuffle away. He had awakened when she had stiffened for the first time, but wished to behold what she would try. Cassandra dragged herself away, but there was no room to escape. Her back hit the carriage window, and she gathered her legs, plastering them to her heaving chest. With eyes blown wide and sweaty hands, she stole a glance towards the man who had her wrapped in his embrace like a precious treasure. His treasure. His molten gold eyes had flickered open, and there was this softness and want with which he stared at her. Those soft brown curls cascaded over his eyes as he forgot to blink, watching the timeless beauty that she was. Her one-of-a-kind fragrance was a torture to his senses. A drop of sweat dripped down the side of her neck, down the perfect arch shape that connected to her slender shoulders. It glistened in the early rays of the sun before merging into her fabric. How he wished to grab her dainty ankle, pull her from it, and have her sprawled underneath him, to kiss the very skin that oozed such scent which was driving him insane with every passing day. Instead, he bent his arm and placed it under his cheek, using it like a pillow to watch her with desire-filled eyes. The awkward lull between them prolonged as Cassandra finally lowered her gaze, unable to hold on to his penetrating one, the one which made her aware of her womanly parts, for they had begun to ache. She cleared her throat. "Did you need to climb on me to sleep?" Cassandra asked, slowly. "It wasn't intentional, but was certainly enticing, and definitely won't be the last time." His deeply hypnotic voice was even more alluring this early in the morning as it resonated all around her. "Keep your limbs to yourself," Cassandra sternly instructed, coiling further into herself. Cyrus knew falling asleep in her vicinity was dangerous. He had lost control and had no clue he had gathered her in his arms. But that was the best sleep he had in years. That was the dangerous pull of the mate bond, and now he knew he was screwed. "Noted," he grunted, more annoyed at himself. He had entered the carriage to speak with her, and instead, he had fallen asleep. And now he had gotten a taste of what it felt like to sleep with one's mate. Like a forbidden fruit. His wanton desires craved her more now. But could he have her? Frustratedly, his lithe fingers raked his silken tresses away from his forehead, and he sat up straight. They needed to head out. The sun was rising fast, and he had slept for far too long. "We are leaving soon, freshen up," he snorted in annoyance while throwing the door open and climbing out. A few more seconds with her, and his mind would be numbed. He needed to get his mind in the right place and curb the temptations. This was going to be a hell of a life. How does one escape the temptation of the mate bond? Once the door closed, Cassandra let out the breath she had been holding. Cyrus scared her, and yet somehow her heart urged her to give in to the temptation and embrace him, to put her trust in the man who claimed to be her mate and savior. And yet her brain told her to be wary. Something was off. The carriage door knocked, and she had to gather her thoughts. Covering herself properly, Cassandra went to open the door and found Renan there holding a wooden bucket filled with water, a washcloth, and a brown cleansing bar made from special oils and herbs. He respectfully bowed, seeing her. "Nissa, I brought some water for morning rituals. We arranged a place where you can cleanse and can have privacy." Cassandra hadn't been so thankful to see a bucket of water before, as she was at that moment. Her clothes were sticking to her because of sweat. She would have preferred a bath, but this would suffice for now. She also needed to relieve herself. "I appreciate it." Grabbing another gown from the luggage that had been placed in her carriage, she climbed down. The sun had begun to rise, spreading its golden rays. Soon, it would be hot again. Any lingering effect of the night, and whatever creatures had arrived, was long gone. Cassandra was curious, but knew Cyrus won't give her answers. She could see a bonfire lit up between the stones she had sat last night on, and some animal was being roasted on the low flames. The burning smell of the meat was heavy in the air. Renan guided her towards a small set-up area behind the bushes. It had been barricaded with erected long tree branches and covered using skin hides and foliage. A makeshift door had been made so Cassandra could enter. She knew this was all done to give her privacy and comfort. With gratification, she peeked a glance at Renan as he placed everything inside and said, "You will have privacy. No one will enter." Swiftly nodding at the man, whose eyes reminded her of a panther, Cassandra entered the makeshift shaft. Renan closed it behind her and turned, finding himself face to face with his extremely angered alpha. "Go tend to the meal," he ordered, the gold in his eyes inking to blood red. His alpha aura leaked through like misty tendrils. Renan instantly bowed his head, seeing him on the edge. "Alpha!" He retreated as hurriedly as was possible for him. Cyrus stood there for a few seconds, hearing any and every sound coming from inside. His super hearing made his ears extra sensitive. Apart from the shuffling of her clothes and slow dipping of the washcloth in the water, he could even hear her slow, shallow breathing. It agitated and beguiled him at the same time. Her scent had seeped into his very existence now, and he had no clue how to stay away. Cassandra took her time cleaning herself and putting on the golden silk gown with an inbuilt corset. It wasn't too tight, though, and had been built to leave room for breathing. She was extremely grateful for that. Her golden curls were still wet, and she didn't have anything to absorb the extra water, so she spread them on her back and let them dry on their own. Finally, she opened the door and stepped out only to come face to face with a very fuming Cyrus. He had his arms crossed. His overly large biceps bulged as his molten lava-shaded eyes brimmed with the fire of his desires. They danced naked for her to see. His gaze dipped and focused on the wet gown clinging to her skin. The water droplets dripped from her open locks and merged in her dress, wetting it further. "You are not going anywhere like this," he fumed, stepping closer and invading her breathing space. He planted both his hands at her sides as his muscular frame blocked all of her view. Cyrus gripped the branches behind her, capturing Cassandra between his Herculean arms, fervently staring down at her. She slowly shifted her gaze upwards to understand what was going through his mind, but could sense smoke coming out of his flared nostrils. The churning gold bled into sanguine as his orbs changed color, and the dragon came to the surface, filling her brain with a haze of need and turning it into mush. "Why?" she asked in defiance, keeping her chin high and trying not to be intimidated by him. "I can see every curve of your body. You are like a siren." "I am not a siren," she retorted back. His body heat was unsettling her. It was like he was smothering her without even touching any part of her body. Why was he always almost naked? The Alpha doesn't have clothes to wear? Poor Alpha. Cassandra thought to herself, not giving in to the temptation of making her eyes dip and take a peek at the glistening torso that was almost in her face. "Oh, bless my memory. You are a princess," he sarcastically blasted. "I don't know what I am anymore." It always itched her the way he kept calling her a princess, as if she was an entitled, spoiled brat. "You will be my Luna, the queen of my people." His scalding breath was on her damp hair. He wished to transform and dry them with his dragon breath, but knew she would probably get scared out of her mind. Keeping her trapped was the best decision. The word "my" hit her right in the heart, and she absorbed the ardency it carried. No one had declared ownership of her like that. At least he cared enough, even though he was a heartless barbarian who participated in bloodshed and chaos. Cyrus observed how her heartbeat intensified and her chest heaved, giving him a peek of her upper swells. The skin was still damp and smoother than any silken material he had ever seen. "Do I have a choice?" she finally asked, slowly, weighing each of her words. "No," he growled, trying to reel in the emotional battles that raged inside of him every time he was in her vicinity. This was not going to be a single battle, he sensed. It was going to be a bloody war, and none of them would come out unscathed. Cyrus didn't let her go until her hair and garb had dried. He finally took a reluctant step back and removed his arm so she could pass. Every meeting with this man was exhilarating and would leave Cassandra grappling for breath. He finally led her to the stones where the breakfast was being cooked. Today they had broken the meat into small tender bits and placed it on a large leaf so she could relish it with ease. A small smile appeared on Cassandra's face, seeing their care. Everyone except Ferris stood up, seeing them approach, and only settled back down once Cyrus had given them permission with a curt nod of his head. Ferris placed a leaf in front of Cassandra as she settled on the stone with a spread cloth for her. He said with a wave of his hand, "Apologies, we have no bread." "It's not an issue. I can eat whatever." Cassandra wasn't a picky eater. She was just not used to eating without proper cutlery. Men were making rowdy jokes that continued into the breakfast. Cyrus had tied up his hair in a tight bun, which accentuated his handsome face even more. Ferris turned his attention to Cyrus and asked with a mischievous twinkle in his eyes, "Took you long enough?" Cassandra had to lower her head and bite her lip. Embarrassment flooded her cheeks. Cyrus grabbed a large stick with a big chunk of meat. "Focus on eating, we need to leave." Renon's small voice came from the side as well, as his long black hair moved like slithering snakes. "I almost lost my head earlier." Ferris guffawed at Renon's words. Cyrus grunted, sinking his sharp teeth into the skewered meat. His eyes flashed dangerously at Renon and then at Ferris. While Renon quickly lowered his head, Ferris was least affected and wriggled his brows at his elder brother. Cassandra observed both of them had quite an easygoing relationship where Ferris seemed like a rule breaker while Cyrus had a more protective approach. Despite everything, he had been safeguarding her since the day they had met, and that was something she couldn't deny. The brown tankards were passed around among the men containing ale. Ferris served one to Cassandra as well with a boyish chuckle. "Here, to ease your nerves. My brother can be much at times." "He seems to specialize in that," Cassandra countered, ignoring Cyrus's glare. Ferris winked at her, not minding his brother as well. She accepted the cup with a slight skepticism, not sure about the contents of the cup. The strong, earthy notes stung her nose, and she knew it was ale. She had never consumed alcohol with breakfast, but the old lifestyle had been left in the past. If she was to adjust with them, she needed to learn their ways and adapt. Before she could take a sip, Cyrus's large hand reached out and grabbed the cup from her dainty hand. "Don't spoil her. Women in her kingdom don't drink cheap ale, especially in the morning." "You wish to make her tipsy for the entirety of the journey?" Cyrus glared at his snickering brother. Before Ferris could add a cheeky remark, Cassandra uttered, "I can handle a little ale." She extended her hand to demand the tankard back. Cyrus slanted his body slightly to cock a brow at her, and she held his gaze without blinking. Ferris whistled, seeing them stare at each other. Cyrus ignored his vexatious brother as he placed the tankard on her palm and said with a challenge. His lips showed a hefty snicker. "Drink up in one breath." "Accepted," Cassandra instantly responded. Hearing their alpha challenge, Cassandra, all the remaining 5 men took off their leather coin pouches from their belts and began to draw coins, ready to bet. 10 gold coins on our future Luna. 20 gold coins, that she can't without coughing. The squabbling began. "All my coins that our future Luna can hold her liquor." Ferris took off his sandy-shaded pouch from his golden belt and placed it along with other coins. What seemed like a small challenge had escalated into this betting competition, and Cassandra couldn't help but shake her head at the dramatics of the men. The need to turn everything into a chaotic contest was something men specialized in. They expectantly watched her while Cyrus's lips twisted into an evil smirk. The challenge in his eyes fanned her desire to prove him wrong. Sucking in a deep breath, Cassandra raised the tankard and brought it to her parted lips. The aroma was overwhelming and assaulting her senses. She could only hope that the taste was not too strong and it had been diluted for the morning consumption. Cassandra forgot one simple point. They were not ordinary men. They were shifters with very rapid metabolic rates. They didn't get drunk unless mythroot herb, which grew on the sides of the huge rocks in their desert area, was added to it. Tipping the wooden container, she let her throat be scalded by the strong, deep amber liquid. It was much stronger than she had anticipated. She was not a quieter, and she wasn't going to give all these haughty men to laugh at her expense. No matter what, She was going to swallow every drop and keep it down. Her wandering eyes peeked at Cyrus from above the rim of the tankard. The spreading of his supple lips and the crinkling of the sides of his eyes told her that this alpha male was amused at this. He was underestimating her, thinking she couldn't do it. It was time to show him. Fighting a cough that was threatening to bring out the burning liquid, Cassandra chugged it down. The slender movements of her neck as she swallowed urged Cyrus to reach out and grab it, to have the pad of his thumb stroke the sensitive juncture between her neck and shoulder blade, the very point where his mark should rest. He was jerked out of his lust-filled dream when Cassandra banged the tankard onto the stone in front of him and wiped her damp lips with the back of her hand. The ale had dampened them, making them so much more desirable, and he wished nothing more but to taste the amber liquid from her lips, to let their breaths mingle, and for her to moan into his mouth. All of that broke when his men who had placed their bets on Cassandra cheered, and she declared, with a challenging smirk and slight tip of her head to the right, "I won." His lips curled up in subtle amusement, hearing her pride-filled words. The innate desire to prove herself and challenge him at the same time was too evident. She wouldn't be an easy girl, and after the ugly truth would be revealed, he wondered how she would cope. "I knew it," Ferris smugly said, seeing his brother lost for words. "Let's see you keep it down. We should get going." Cyrus abruptly got up, making her cynically scoff. Of course, the majestic alpha can't take it that he was proven wrong in front of his men, she thought. He was too proud. The men divided the winnings. Most of them went to Ferris, and he seemed quite proud of the fact. "We can share." Ferris dangled his pouch in front of Cassandra, which was significantly heavier than previously. Cassandra shook her head in amusement. "Keep it." Ferris walked Cassandra back to the carriage, while the others adjusted the saddles and bridles of the steeds. Two of them shifted and turned into horses, explaining why there were more men and fewer horses previously. "You did good. Brother can't take it when someone challenges him and comes on top. Perks of being the alpha, inflated ego." Ferris stylishly wriggled his bronze shoulders, and Cassandra couldn't help but chuckle at his easygoing nature. She noticed his left bicep had the same tattoo that Cyrus and other men carried. It seemed like the insignia or symbol of their pack, and had been burnt in their flesh. "Well, it's the first time for everything." Cassandra delicately shrugged one of her shoulders and entered the carriage. Ferris quietly closed the door behind her with a grin. Soon their tiny caravan began to head out. The horses neighed, and the men shouted. The hooves thundered against the ground. The dry dust impregnated the air, and only smoke and dust were left behind. Cassandra sat huddled by the open window. The landscape was drastically changing. Vegetation was declining. Soil was getting sandier, and the climate was shifting towards torrid. Even the air grazing her face was much warmer than before, turning her cheeks into small tomatoes. She kept sipping water from the water skin she had been provided. On a few occasions, she caught a glimpse of Cyrus. Mostly he remained ahead, leading the caravan, ever ready to defend in case anyone was stupid enough to attack. But sometimes he would slow down and let Ferris take charge. Cyrus's midnight black stallion was the mightiest horse Cassandra had ever seen. His silky mane was so long that it had been twisted into curls and braids. The wind swept past him as he galloped at a super speed. The fine specimen with toned muscles and strong legs carried an even finer specimen. Cyrus's bronzed body gleamed under the blazing, tortuous Sunday. Every pore oozed out beads of sweat that enveloped his torso. Layer upon layer of muscles were on display for Cassandra to openly ogle at as he rode alongside the carriage. His sandaled feet firmly rested on the stirrup as his strong arms reined in the wild stallion. The effort to tear away her eyes was arduous, like being lost in a spell of his creation. She found it strenuous to breathe. The rich ale she had consumed earlier certainly made her tipsy, as Cyrus had predicted. It messed with her head and put lewd thoughts in her brain. The thoughts of her tangled with him, which the sane part of Cassandra would never do. Cyrus's untamable hair effortlessly soared behind him. The harsh curves of his angular jawline were highlighted by the raging sun, and there wasn't a prettier sight Cassandra had seen before. The epitome of rugged masculinity rode alongside her, and then he tilted his head, and his honeyed eyes found her mesmerized violet ones. She had placed her hands on the windowsill, and the tip of her pointed chin rested on them. The keenness to observe the outside world had paused on him. She didn't understand this unholy attraction she felt for this stranger who claimed to be her mate and had stolen her away. He was no knight in shining armor. Instead, he was a harbinger of sins and desires that threatened to rip her morals apart. Cyrus didn't know the extent to which the mate bond pulled him to Cassandra. It hummed in her chest like a melodious symphony as it did for him, calling him to her. She was just more adept at masking it. With a pompous grin that adorned his curvaceous lips, he pricked the side of his riding beast and galloped forward. Giving Cassandra an ostentatious view of his sinewy back, the muscles bulged and rippled, making her breathlessly sigh. And he had the audacity to call me a siren. The proud male. What am I going to do about you? She thought out aloud, letting the wind carry her needy words away. Their little convoy halted for the evening, and Cyrus announced they would be stopping there for the night. His men gathered to cook up some more meat. Cyrus entered the carriage again, holding the flimsy gown he had wrapped around her in the arena, and staked his claim. Cassandra remembered it well. He didn't fully enter the space, for he didn't wish to be distracted by her rich scent, which always messed with his head. Tomorrow we will enter our territory. You need to wear this so everyone can know you are my woman, and I am bringing their Luna home. Everyone is expecting you. The deep, rich notes of his voice captivated her in ways she wasn't ready to admit. He extended the gown towards a startled Cassandra. The soft material almost slipped from his large hands as Cassandra took it in hers. She knew this was important to him, some kind of ritual he had performed by draping it around her shoulders that time. She only gave him a slight nod and he turned away, quietly closing the door behind him. Cassandra was plunged into deep thoughts. This gown was not merely a piece of cloth. It was a symbol for him and a new beginning for her. He had purposely not put it on Cassandra for the second time, leaving that choice to her. Putting it on meant she was ready to begin this journey with him, putting her old life behind, forgetting she had a fiancé until a few days ago.